Hello and welcome to Frost Over the World. It's the first anniversary of Al Jazeera English. Happy birthday, Al Jazeera English. So later in the programme we'll take a look at the first 12 months of this new channel. Plus Jemima Khan talking about Pakistan, the bloodshed in Gaza, musician Jean-Michel Jarre, and the worrying prospects of another war between Ethiopia and Eritrea. But first, South America. This week's Ibero-American summit in Chile was supposed to send a harmonious signal of Latin unity, but the result was rather different, with discreet rows breaking out between Argentina and Uruguay over paper mills, and a very public spat between the King of Spain and the President of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez.
Por favor, no hagamos diálogo.
Well, if you blinked there, you missed it. But anyway, it was there. It was there on the screen. Meanwhile, Mr. Chavez has been doing some less public negotiations on behalf of his next-door neighbours in Colombia, attempting to persuade the FARC guerrillas to lay down their weapons after more than 40 years of fighting. But is there any chance of success? Or is Colombia, a country that's been ravaged by violence and kidnap, destined to remain a lawless territory? I'm delighted now to be welcomed by the Vice President of Colombia, Fransisco Santos Calderon. Santos, welcome. We welcome you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you very much, David.
How many hostages do you think there are today in the country?
Well, let me first try to change a little bit of the perceived image that Colombia has.
Right.
Colombia right now, in the last 5 years, under the present government, has reduced murders by 50%, kidnappings by 80%, terrorist attacks by 75%. All over Latin America, governments are coming to look at our experience and saying, you know, how did you do it? And you do it obviously with being tough. You have to be tough in a country that has such big problems. Obviously respecting the law, but those results are changing in Colombia from that very critical moment we had 5 years ago is now a totally different country that is growing 7%, lots of foreign investment. So that's what's happening. Regarding kidnappings, we had a huge problem. It's now diminished. In the year 2002, we had 3,000 kidnappings. This year, we will probably have less than 300. So that's a 90% reduction. Still too many, but we got the problem under control, a problem that unfortunately is growing in the rest of Latin America. It's Sumi. And the exact numbers of how many people right now are kidnapped, we don't have the exact data precisely because our databases unfortunately put people inside but never took them out whenever they were released via payment, etc. So far, what we can foresee is that around 1,000 people are still kidnapped or are dead in kidnapping after 5 or 6 years of negotiations. A lot of times they break over and nobody else talks about it and the person is dead and never recovered.
And you went through this yourself,
yes.
Didn't you? In fact, how long were you a hostage? You were hostage of the Medellin, yes?
Yeah,
the drug cartel.
Yes, of Pablo Escobar. I was kidnapped on the 19th of September of 1990 and held chained to a bed during 8 months until 20th of May of 1991.
And how were you rescued?
Well, actually, it was a different type of kidnapping that is very well portrayed in a book by Gabriel Garcia Marquez called News of a Kidnapping. It was more of a political hostage. There were like 10 journalists kidnapped. He had us so that he was captured because all the government was pursuing him. He would trade us, and he was putting pressure so that he would get extradition, which they really disliked, extradition of drug traffickers to the U.S. They were pushing a constituent assembly that was then working to stop extraditions, which they were able to obtain.
Why did Colombia become, as it were, the capital of kidnapping? I mean, in the sense, why did FARC and the other groups hit on kidnapping so strongly? You've explained how you've managed to cut it back, but why did it become the sort of kidnapping capital of the world?
I think it had a mixture of things. That is what you have to look into when you see a rise in kidnapping. A weak state with weak police capabilities, with corrupt police institutions, with a weak judicial system that cannot investigate, and with powerful criminal organizations that, in the case of Colombia, the extreme leftist group like the FARC and the ELN, and then there were others, started creating a massive kidnapping industry. Then comes drug trafficking. And you know that in drug trafficking, there's no laws. So how do you, if a deal goes bad, how do you get paid? Through a kidnapping. And that boomed the kidnapping capacity within, criminal gangs. So when they weren't working for the drug trafficker, they were working on their own. They learned the business, and that's where the cycle of kidnapping increased from less than 50 a year in Colombia in the early 80s to more than 2,000 only 10 years later. So it's a mixture of things, but I think the most important is when you have a very weak state with very weak police capacities and a very weak judicial system, criminals will start doing that type of business, which is very, very profitable.
And at the same time, what do you think of the prospects? President Chavez is sort of the mediator figure between you and FARC, the guerrillas. Do you think he can engineer a breakthrough?
This is a topic that, because and so far the discussions are focused on the release of more than 50 hostages that they've had kidnapped for more than 10 years, some of them. 10 years. They have people kidnapped more than 10 years ago. The case of the presidential candidate, Ingrid Betancourt, she's been kidnapped for 5 years. So that just shows the cruelty of that organization, the mindset. The only time we saw kidnappings like that was in Lebanon in the 80s of the Americans. Well, in Colombia, we have that type of criminal organization now. And President Chavez is doing its best. We think, we hope he'll be successful for the health of those persons. And he's working very hard at it. We tend to be very discreet about public pronouncement regarding his success, etc., because it might be badly interpreted, etc. So we certainly hope he'll be successful. We've allowed him a free rein so that he can be able to do the mediation, and let's see if he's able to pull it off.
I see, and he's got that free rein, as it were.
Oh, well, the president just put two conditions for the release. One of them, no free zone in Colombia, because they wanted to have a free zone, and the government has been very clear that you can release hostages without a free zone. And the second...
Excuse me interrupting there. That's the one thing that puzzled me reading about it. What's wrong with a free zone?
Well, we had a peace process from the year 1999 to the year 2002 with a free zone that was used exclusively for drug trafficking, for maintaining hostages, for kidnapping, and increase the capability of that illegal organization in doing damage. I'll give you an example. If the IRA had asked Londonderry or Derry as a demilitarized zone to negotiate, nobody would have accepted it. That's exactly what they are asking for in Colombia.
I see, so that's why you stand firm.
That's it, and we don't think it's necessary. We think there are many other ways of dealing with the problem so that we can negotiate. But they haven't so far. For 4 years, for 5 years, the FARC hasn't accepted many different offerings that the Colombian government gave them, and many other ways out that the Colombian government has given them, and they haven't accepted any of them.
Thank you so much for being with us. I hope the mediation works. Great
I
news.
hope for the families too.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Santos. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks a lot.
In a moment, I'll be analysing another violent week in Gaza. That's after this short break.